I should go like Mike.
It's there.
Call to order the February 13th Chaska Planning Commission meeting. Liz, you want to do the roll call, please?
Bovee?
Here.
Cross?
Here.
Delkey?
Here.
Piper?
Here.
Urbanski?
Here.
Seiler?
Here.
Lacy Senior?
Here.
Grass?
Here.
Olson?
Here.
I apologize, it should have ended with you with Delkey, so Chairperson Delkey.
I'm still here. Okay, very good. So next we will adopt the agenda for tonight. We would need a motion from someone for that.
I recommend that we adopt the agenda.
Second?
Second by, motion by Commissioner Cross, second by Bovee. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Motion carries. Obviously, we have no visitor presentation tonight since we have no visitors. So that's probably a good way to start out a meeting with a brand new group of people. So now we're going to approve the previous Planning Commission meeting, and I'm not sure, did everybody get that?
Yep. Yes.
So any...
Yes, I need to say something. Heather was both present and absent on the roll call.
I was here in spirit.
I was going to say, I didn't think you were here.
No, it's listed as being her.
I checked to make sure I was on there as absent.
Yes.
I didn't check to see if I was present, so good catch.
Otherwise, I recommend we approve as corrected.
All right, can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner
Lacy.
Lacy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. All right, next is the consent agenda where we'll approve, we have two final final plans for the Savanna Estate 3rd edition and the final plat for the Club West 9th edition. Can I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
Do we adopt them at the same time? Okay. I will make, oh, do you have, is there any discussion?
I'm sorry, I have a question.
Should we do that? Should we make a motion first, or go ahead? Okay, go ahead, Susan.
I thought there was kind of a minimum size lot for Club West, and we have a 50-footer, and I thought we kind of had it at 60. There is in this plat a 50-foot long one. It's 50+ inches. And with the setbacks of 15 feet total, it leaves you a 35-foot lot, width. And if in that area there's a lot of 3-car garages, it would not meet our requirements of how it looks.
Well, I think one explanation to what they might do out there is they are incorporating a new product. It's more narrow or less larger product that you see out there right now. So it's going to be a product that you see on the west side of Savanna Way. So they're definitely making products that are able to fit within that.
This is Club West, not Savanna.
Correct. But they have been starting to introduce that smaller product within this side.
Okay. I just have never seen a 50-footer with before for a lot. All right, that takes care of my one question. But I unfortunately have another question on Savanna. It says we're approving 25 lots, but the plat has 26 on it. And I assume that's to catch up a mistake. But
It's 25 new lots. However, there's 26 lots that are being platted as a part of that.
Yes.
There's an existing lot that's already
Yes.
platted. They're adding 10 feet onto that lot. So it's being incorporated into this final plat.
Okay, it just doesn't say that on what on our list, we keep saying 25 lots, and it's actually 26 and with a house on it already.
Right.
Okay,
So that's my bad for not clarifying that in the staff report.
okay. Then I have no problems then.
All right, can we get a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
I will make a motion to adopt the 2 items on the consent agenda, the approval of the final plat for Savanna Estates, 3rd edition, and approval for the final plat for Club West, 9th edition.
All right, motion by Commissioner Pfeiffer. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All right, Commissioner Seiler, seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda carries. All right, action items for tonight. Tonight, we're going to look at the concept plan for the Chaska Building Center phase. I guess it's the east end of the property down there, and Liz will walk us through that.
And before I get into that, I'll kind of give us a little bit of a briefing, hopefully give some time for the applicant to arrive to the meeting as well, since they should be here during this project proposal. But one thing that I added in that staff report, since we have 5 new members here on the Planning Commission tonight, is kind of going through the process that we do at the city level when a new project comes into town, so whether it's a new subdivision, a new commercial or office building, or a plat coming through, we have a certain process that we go through for an applicant. So it's laid out in 3 steps: concept plan, preliminary plan, and final plan. So the concept plan is kind of that initial starting plan for the actual project. Luckily tonight we get to kind of have you guys start at that initial first step in the process. So the purpose of the concept plan is to basically introduce the project to staff, the Planning Commission, and City Council. So a lot of the information that you're receiving at this time is very conceptual. Much of the information is going to be found in their narrative and some brief sketches corresponding with that. So it's really meant for the applicant to, at a very lower level, value level, be able to provide some information on what they're planning to propose within the city. So this is usually a process that doesn't involve a lot of money, so that as they're introducing the project, they're not getting too far in with what they're proposing, so that they can get feedback from staff, the Planning Commission, and City Council without spending too much money ahead of time. So again, as you're receiving a concept plan, you're basically able to absorb the information that is given during that concept plan submittal process and review, and react to it. What's your initial feedback back to the applicant based on what they're proposing? So basically the applicant kind of has to absorb the information that's provided from staff, Planning Commission, and City Council during this concept plan to really utilize when they start to develop those high technical, more expensive drawings that are required. So that kind of allows them to transition well into that preliminary stage, which is our second step in the process. So this is when you'll start to see more technical drawings be developed as a part of the project. So that involves engineering, the site plans on more scale drawings, landscape plans, and architectural drawings. So you get to see basically all the details laid out in front of you on what they're proposing. Some of these plans might not correspond to a plat application per se, but either way, you're getting more of those technical to scale drawings as a part of the preliminary plan. So
The goal is with the concept plan, comments that were received, they can basically address that into the technical drawings during that stage. So at that time, they should start to be addressing some of those comments that were brought up during the concept plan process and put those into those more technical drawings during the preliminary plan. So again, you all see the project during the second step. You basically absorb the information, and this is when we start to talk about how does the plan meet certain city codes. Does it meet parking? Does it meet landscaping requirements? Does it start to meet the engineering standards that are laid out for the city? So we look at those technical drawings and let you know whether or not they're starting to meet those certain code pieces. So again, you react to that preliminary plan. If there's things that they need to still address, you provide that feedback back to them during that preliminary review for them to address in their final plan. So the final plan is the third and final step of the process. It's basically a resubmittal of those technical drawings that you see during the preliminary plan, but at this time they should be essentially dotting the i's and crossing the t's on some of the things that were brought up during the preliminary stages. So at this time it should be at a point where it's fully cooked in terms of the plans. So any of the concerns that were brought up during concept and preliminary should be resolved at this point. And usually that's the case, in which case a lot of these final plans do go on consent agenda for no discussion because they basically met the criteria that was laid out for them. In the event that there's significant pieces that are still left unaddressed or requires further discussion, then we'll keep it as a discussion item on the agenda, a part of the meeting. But that's typically the process in kind of a nutshell. So again, luckily you kind of get to start at the right point here tonight with the concept plan that's before you. So we'll start from there and kind of work your way through the process. So this isn't going to be the first nor last time that you guys are going to see this project tonight. It's just the first step in the approval process. Do you guys have any questions right off the bat? All right.
Nope.
Well, I'll get right into it then. So
Liz,
we've got,
just so you know, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
this is not on,
oh, it's not?
no.
Kevin? Do you know how to work this? It's going.
I'll call real quick.
All right, it looks like she found power. And I guess everybody should,
Oh,
So it looks like it's on.
I think it's on.
It's on now.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
And I should
Lisa
mention,
has
everybody, kind of make sure your microphones are,
it was on,
I think
but
you're
now-
good. I mean, they're
Oh,
on,
there.
just kind of so that
There we go.
for the 1.7 million people watching us. I wanna make sure. Was that right, Kevin?
Viewers. All right.
We have a new chair, so we've kind of gone up.
Yeah, for the first night.
All right, so we've got a concept plan tonight before you. It's specifically for the DDK office and industrial buildings, specifically at the Chaska Building Center site. This is kind of phase 3 of the project. There's been a couple phases before it. The site we're looking at is highlighted in blue. It's a little, I'll show a preliminary plat too, or a final plat of how this area lays out. But generally, this is where the site is located. It's on the intersection of Fire Lane and Chaska Boulevard, still technically considered in our downtown, downtown of Chaska. The other sites that are considered a part of the Chaska Building Center site are just west of this subject site. So you have The former Cope building, which is currently being constructed right now, that went through their approvals in previous months. And then we also have another DDK building, which is known as their cabinet shop on the most westerly side. And that was basically the first phase in the project. So you have phase 1, phase 2, and now we're looking at phase 3 and final phase of this area. So in terms of a background of history of this site in particular, the discussion started in May of 2010 where they approved a concept plan for the DDK building that's on the most westerly portion of the site that's already constructed. And then in August and October of 2011, the preliminary and final site and building plans were approved for that DDK building. So there was a little bit of a gap in between the first building getting approved up until the second building getting approved in May and July of 2018, which was just last year. The preliminary and final site plans were approved for the former Cope building, for the one that's currently being constructed. Another item of note, just for your understanding, is in January of 2012, the city did adopt a downtown master plan, which encompasses all of our historic downtown, but also these other near vicinity areas that are considered a part of downtown. Certain areas were called out for redevelopment opportunities. This site in particular was called out as a redevelopment site. It's known as the East Chaska Boulevard District. So it was essentially guided for an employment center opportunity in downtown, and specifically for the uses of having a business park, light industrial uses, office, research and development, and even medical uses. So when projects start to develop in these certain areas, we have to look to see how they are in line with these long-range plans. This is one of the exhibits that were provided from the applicant, just to give you kind of that overview of the overall Chaska Building Center site area. So again, the first phase is on the westerly portion of the DDK office and industrial building, and then Formicote is in the center here, and then the proposed site is on the corner of Fire Lane and Chaska Boulevard. And then this is the plat that was done when Formicote went in. They also platted the lot east of them for this site, so that they did not have to go through that when they came through with their project. They're essentially platting off the last 3.9 acres for this site to build on. So previously, both these sites did contain several outbuildings and various buildings on it, which have since been demolished, and the concrete pads have been removed from the site once the Formicote site started to take off. So now it's a viable site for building on at this point. Another item of note that's significant for the Chaska Building Center site is there is a shared driveway that exists on the north end of all these sites. So it basically extends across the Formicote site and into this site that we're looking at now. So basically all three lots have access to the shared driveway for purposes to access their site. The county limited this site to only having basically one access off of the county road. Therefore, a shared driveway component in the back was kind of one of those ways to help with the accessibility into these different sites. This site in particular does have double street frontage, so it does kind of set itself apart from the other two sites. So Fire Lane, which stubs off basically almost towards the end of this lot's depth, but it has frontage on there, and also Chaska Boulevard as well. So the accesses that they're going to be proposing are going to come off of strictly from Fire Lane due to the limitations that the county has put on the county road, Chaska Boulevard, for them to only have one access, which is already in place. So specifically what they're asking tonight with this concept plan approval is they are asking for approval of the construction of a new industrial building and then new professional office buildings, 3 to be exact. So in terms of what they're proposing in terms of use out there, it is consistent with the zoning that was put in place when the former Coat building went in. So it was rezoned to a planned multi-use district, specifically PMD 21. So the uses that are laid out within that zoning district, and even the guidance that was provided in the downtown master plan, what they're proposing tonight is consistent with both of those pieces. So now I have the site plan or concept plan before you on this slide. So they are showing the professional office buildings being more on the front end or south end of the actual site, and then they have the industrial building behind that, or more on the north side of the site. So here's Fire Lane and then Chaska Boulevard that I'm just trying to highlight here. So they're planning to have 3 different accesses into this site off of Fire Lane. Their intention is to really set these sites apart from each other. So the professional office buildings will have an access to their own parking lot. So that access basically aligns with a current access into the Cuzzi's restaurant to the east. The industrial building also has its own access into their parking lot as well. And then the third access is proposed on the northerly side to connect into that shared driveway piece that's in existence up there. So in terms of kind of where the buildings are laying out and what they're showing for that, you're able to see even on this drawing with the Formicote building overlaid on top of their plan, how their building relates to what they're proposing for their setbacks. So both the DDK building, the existing DDK building, and Formicote building are pretty in line with each other in terms of where they're set back from the Chaska Boulevard Road there. They've shown more of a setback off of this road, and there's about a 27-foot difference between the front of their buildings and the Formicote building and DDK building. And the reason they've done this is due to the overall layout and parking component side of things. You know, they looked at the marketability of these units. They wanted to make sure that there were parking stalls in front of all of these units so that they're conveniently accessed for the users of these buildings. So they had, in order to stay in line with the Cuzzi's access on the east side and keeping their driveway access there as well, this layout in terms of getting parking stalls in front of their building is what they came to. So they did provide an alternative layout where basically push the parking more south to be in line with the Formicote building as well as buildings. But as soon as you do that, it starts to skew kind of the steepness of this access into the site. And when you do that, it takes away 4 stalls on that edge there. So they're trying to create an opportunity that makes the site more marketable and convenient for the end users there. I'll kind of get into staff's analysis on that a little bit later, but that's kind of the outcome that they've come to at this concept level. One of the things that they have proposed on the north side is some loading dock opportunities for the industrial building. So all the other 2 buildings have loading docks as well, which is not an uncommon piece that you see on industrial buildings. So they're also proposing an area for loading docks to occur. With this site being pushed back a little bit, it does create kind of a tightness on that north side there, especially with the shared driveway access that has to maintain a 24-foot wide access back there. So although we don't have all the answers of this right now, it definitely is a concern in terms of how all of this is going to fit, how they're going to get standard size semis back there without blocking the shared driveway access. It's definitely going to be one of those things that we'll hone in on as we go through the preliminary process, but something we want to point out now that we have concerns with. For parking, usually we don't get into the number analysis too much at this stage, but since they are showing the number of parking stalls as well as the square footage of these buildings, it does appear in terms of our city code that they are deficient by 24 stalls. They have to meet a certain number of parking stalls based on the types of uses that are proposed out there. So we come up with a number, which we provided in your report on what that number is based on the size of those uses. Typically, we don't ask that all those stalls be constructed as a part of a project like this. We want them to construct as much as they need, but we always need to see on a site plan proof of parking to show how the building and the site can meet parking in the event that they need extra parking. So at this point, the way it lays out, they're deficient by 24 parking stalls. It's hard to see where some of those stalls can be accommodated on site. They have some room to work with on the south side in a matter of how they lay out the entire site. So there's probably things that can be worked out in terms of the size of the uses or where some of the parking stalls can actually occur. So again, that's something that we'll have to work on as they bring back their preliminary plan. They are proposing a pedestrian connection on the easterly side of their site, but on the west side of Fire Lane. It has been called out in our downtown master plan as a pedestrian connection opportunity. Ultimately, Fire Lane is planned to be extended to Yellow Brick Road in the future. So setting up pedestrian connections during these early stages is important in terms of allowing people to transverse through the property. But also there is a city trail along the Chaska Creek there. So even if it's setting it up for future connections, it's still providing a connection to the city's system. So this will definitely be an important piece to implement as a part of this plan. The county also has improvement plans on the county road, which I'll have a slide for that as well, and I'll go over that then. But also wanted to show their alternative layout in terms of pushing that parking more south. So this is kind of the area in question. There used to be 4 stalls here, so when they push the parking lot south, they basically lose those stalls as a result of this skewed driveway access. So I guess one of the tenant units on the professional office building doesn't have that direct connection to those stalls, and to them, that's unmarketable. This is just a more zoomed out perspective to show kind of how it fits in with kind of the overall context. So you got the Formicote building here and DDK building here, and then their building is highlighted in gray. So if we need a reference back to this exhibit, we have it. In terms of the architecture out there, so on this screen I have the professional office buildings being shown. So they're broken up into 3 different buildings. 2 of them are going to have 3 units within them. 1 of them is going to have 2 units within them. So we'll have an opportunity for 8 tenant spaces as a result of these buildings. Total of 12,000 square feet when you put it all together. One of their main intentions with these buildings is to set them apart from the industrial buildings, since they're basically catering to a different type of user. So their intention behind kind of the different look is really to set them apart. So they kind of have more of a residential feel for these buildings because of that. The materials they're proposing is glass, brick, stone, and LP SmartSide. So they'll just have to show during their preliminary submittal how they meet our building design and materials for office buildings. So with any type of building coming into the city, there's a certain building makeup that they have to meet for Class 1 materials that usually involves brick, natural stone, glass, tend to fall within that Class 1 category. So they have to provide a certain amount of that depending on the type of building that they're proposing. So again, we usually get into how they meet that during the preliminary stages. 360-degree architecture is a term you might hear as we kind of go through the site plan and building plan processes. And it essentially means that, you know, the articulation and details that you usually find on the front of a building should be carried through all the way around the building. Usually we highlight that on the facades that are more exposed, that you can see from public right-of-way. So we typically highlight what those are during this concept plan process. So since this lot has double street frontage, that's when it comes into play a little bit more. So we kind of highlight those areas that are more visible. So that would be the south and the east sides of this site, and that would be the same for the sides of the building. So we just make reference now that those south and east facades of these buildings should show some consistent articulation or at least some details on those facades so that they're well articulated. So I wanted to bring in a couple pictures of where they have this product today. For the professional office buildings, they have built a similar product in Mendota Heights here within the city. And it's also situated within an industrial park because we wanted to get a comparison of how it actually, this style and design of building actually fits into an industrial park. So they have shown a couple context photos of that. There's more that were provided in your packet, but these are just a few to kind of reference off of. So the professional office buildings in Mendota Heights are here, kind of situated off of a cul-de-sac on their own site. I think, you know, when you compare apples to apples on this, the difference between this site and the one we're dealing with today is there's much more separation between the site in Mendota Heights compared to the site we're dealing with now. You know, we're placing professional office buildings basically on the same site as another industrial building that they're planning to build. So there's definitely that spacing comparison that's different in this instance that as staff, when we analyze this, it doesn't really fall in the same boat as what you see in Mendota Heights. With the industrial building, this one is a one-story, 25,000 square foot building with 6 tenant spaces called out within that building, 20 feet high at its maximum height as of right now. And I would say with both the professional office buildings and the industrial building, they don't have any end users identified at this point, so the amount of tenant spaces can shift a little as they start to nail those down. So they may end up even with 3 tenant spaces within this industrial building. Again, that's all going to be dictated by the people that they're able to find to occupy these buildings. I've already noted that there's loading docks in the rear of this building. They're planning to use glass, brick, stone, furnished block, and precast panels. So this building will have a different set of standards that it'll need to meet for our building design and materials ordinance because it's an industrial building. So it's a little bit lighter on the side of how much Class 1 materials need to make up this building compared to the office building. I provided those differences in the report just briefly for you. And again, going back to that 360-degree architecture concept or idea, making sure that the south and east sides carry that through. They did provide a conceptual drawing on how the loading docks could potentially work on the north side there. Again, this is still kind of being evaluated and being squared away, kind of based on who the end users are at the end of this. But just showing kind of an initial analysis of how trucks can basically access that loading dock area. Again, that just brings up our concern with the spacing issue. What size of semis can actually fit back there without compromising the shared driveway access. Again, it has to show a 24-foot wide, non-obstructed driveway area on the north side there. So again, at this stage, it's good for us to understand it as a concern and something that we'll further need to analyze during the preliminary process. So like I noted before, Carver County does have plans to improve Chaska Boulevard, County Road 61. And we wanted to make sure the applicant was aware of that as they're kind of going through their plans. We've provided an excerpt from their improvement plan document as a part of the report, just to show what kind of improvements are going to be happening. It basically shows kind of the future look of you know, how Fire Lane may be able to connect into Yellow Brick Road to the north there, but just making sure that they're aware that there's improvements that are planning to be made on this major thoroughfare. So they're aware of it, they're planning for it. One of the pieces is making sure that that pedestrian connection is started on the Fire Lane, which they are showing as a part of their plans. They are also showing the county's plans to incorporate sidewalk on the north side of Chaska Boulevard, the south side of their site, so they are recognizing that as well. So I kind of like to lay out the things that they still have yet to work on and address as they prepare for their preliminary submittal. So most of these I've touched on, but I'll reiterate for discussion purposes. But in terms of the overall layout of the site, you know, as we kind of see it now, it does feel a little tight in terms of the parking that they need to provide, the setbacks that they need to meet out there, space for the loading dock and for the shared driveway component, as well as other things that they need to keep in mind as they're putting those technical drawings together, such as planting islands are needed in the parking lot. So all those things will need to be accounted for or addressed during their preliminary plan. Another piece is they need to align all of their vehicle accesses with CUSIs. There was one in the center of the site that's a little offset of the CUSIs, which is the one that accesses the industrial properties. So it has always been good format, good traffic control to align those accesses. So that's one of our conditions of approval as a part of this concept plan, is aligning those accesses. In terms of how the overall site kind of fits in with the rest of the Chaska Building Center sites to the west of it, looking at the setbacks and seeing how things can start to align there instead of having an awkward break between the setbacks of those buildings on this site. So looking into that a little bit more, which could also provide for better spacing allowance on the north side where the loading docks are. So there could be definitely a twofold advantage of looking at that a little bit better. Again, meeting the setbacks for the site, so those have already been established when the rezoning went through with this site, so they'll have to meet those when they start to prepare those site plans for the site. In terms of the building design, kind of how we've iterated before is the office buildings don't seem to really fit in with the overall project, given kind of the proximity it is to the other industrial buildings out there. So how can they start to show a little bit more consistency between all of those buildings to show that it's one development there? And like we've mentioned in other projects, how do these buildings fit into Chaska? You know, we advantageously have been able to set a pretty good precedence here in terms of, you know, what tends to be more of a Chaska building. You can do that with the brick, you can do that with some of the details that are implemented into the building. So how can you show that these buildings are Chaska buildings? And then parking, hopefully at the preliminary level, we'll be able to address some of the concerns that were brought up tonight to show enough parking throughout the entire site. So those are kind of the main things that were referenced in the report, but things to work on as they submit for preliminary. These are not uncommon things that we find during the concept plan process. It's just a matter of getting them geared up appropriately for preliminary submittal. So with that, we are asking you to make a motion tonight to recommend approval of the concept plan for the DDK office and industrial buildings on the Chaska Building Center site based on the conditions that are laid out in my staff report. We do have the applicant here in the audience if you have any specific questions for them. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have right now.
Got a small
Yes.
handful of questions. So on the parking requirements for the 25,000 for the industrial building, so I'm looking at the parking table, so taking the breakdown from the office component to the industrial building, so it looks like they're predicting or imagining a 15% office finish, which brings you the 12,000 plus the 15% of the 25 to the total office
Right.
footprint to get
Yep.
the parking, and then 30% manufacturing with 50% warehouse. Is
Right.
that what
Yep.
kind of
And
envisioning?
that's
think
all
that-
information that we initially get from the applicant in terms of how do you see these buildings programming
Sure.
for us to get that initial estimate.
And so I think that, I think that's a good estimate for a building like that, because you brought up the point about if it changes in the future, you'd need more parking.
Right.
And I think that's a pretty fair estimation of how the space would be used for that type of building. Another question I had was the trucks in the back. So on that model with the semi-parking, are those 53 footers? Do we know what those right there with a cab?
From initial assumption, I would say no.
Okay,
They're probably more of a box truck
a box
size.
truck size.
At this
So-
point. So again, we don't have all those details
Sure.
right now. We only have very conceptual analysis of it, but something that we're definitely concerned about in terms of what size of vehicles can they fit back there.
Right. Because the concern, like what you had mentioned, the concern I'd have would be if there was a 53-footer parked there. I mean, it says fire lane access to get to fire lane, but I'm thinking more like fire lane for like a fire truck, fire life safety.
Yep.
If there was one, let's say, parked overnight that didn't leave, and then there was a fire.
Right.
And you need to get back there. So that could be a hindrance with that. And then what's the clear height on the building, of the industrial building?
What's the height?
The height, yeah.
Yeah, 20 feet. on
20
that
feet.
Right now, yep.
Okay. Those are my questions.
Okay, thank you.
Couple.
Yes.
At this point, would we look at, does it seem to fit the stormwater plan?
We don't get into too much detail with the stormwater plan. We just more or less want to understand if they're actually providing some stormwater areas on the
Okay.
site. So until we get into the preliminary, then we start to get into kind of all the stormwater requirements that are involved with that.
Okay.
So at this level, it's very
Right.
conceptual. We don't have all that information.
And then with the truck traffic coming out on Fire Lane, is there an improvement plan for Fire Lane immediately, or would that be something that would be done in the future, and would Fire Lane handle the truck traffic that's gonna be generated from this?
That's a good question, and I think something that will have to be addressed as a part of their preliminary submittal is provide more of a traffic analysis on, you know, how many trucks are they planning to have back there, and what kind of result is it going to have on the road? Because I don't think right now we have any initial plans of,
The county plan has potential improvements at that intersection of Fire Lane and County Road 61. And they're kind of working from west to east on that, and so they'll be getting there. Just the timing is a little uncertain yet. But last year they did the section of 61 in front of the curling rink, and I think next summer they're doing the section from 41 out to the bridge, which is just at the western edge of this project. And then I would assume about 2 years after that is when they would continue probably out to Crosstown or something
Okay.
like that.
That's all.
thank you.
I had one thing. I had noticed one of your concerns, the city's concerns, was with the, we talked about how the buildings, I guess, blend together, the industrial building and then the office buildings, and concern with the roof, one of them being flat and one of them being pitched. And I'm wondering, I mean, would the city be comfortable if they came forward with a plan where the materials, there are some shared materials, the brick, the stone, the glass, that if they're using those similar materials to have them blend, but the roofing is different? I mean, would the city be comfortable with that? And the reason I bring that up is when I see a flat-roofed building, I think of the buildings that we see down Chaska Boulevard and like on the corner, like where that Caribou is on Chaska Boulevard and Audubon. They're more like coffee shops and those kinds, you know, it is more kind of strip mall-y and industrial. And I just wonder if it would give the wrong impression if the front buildings, just for the sake of matching the roof with the back building, if it might give the wrong impression of what kind of building it is. So I'm just wondering, would the city be comfortable if they came forward with a plan, you know, when they came to the preliminary, if they came forward with a plan that the brick and the glass and everything is matching, but the roof is different, would that be okay? Because like I looked at the Mendota Heights building with the Google, what's it called? Whatever, where you can see all the, see the images. And those buildings are very different. I mean, one is like white with a blue strip around it, and the others are more brown toned. So they stuck out as, they didn't seem coordinated to me personally, but I could see that they could be coordinated. And then, like, if you look at Engler and 41, where those, like, relaxation dentistry and all those are, they all have that pitched roof, and I see these buildings as being more along those lines. So I'm just curious how the city sees that, if we're kind of firm about, like, the roof, or if that was just one idea, or.
Yeah, and the ones that are on Engler Boulevard and Highway 41, those are very intentional to have pitched roofs because of the context that they're in. They were butting up to a residential
Houses,
neighborhood,
yeah.
so it was very appropriate
Right.
reaction to kind of their adjacent neighbors. I think with this one, where we're falling is just how we see it as a whole. You know, these buildings are a part of kind of one site. We kind of visualize it. So how do we see kind of the harmony between those different buildings? So I think it's just going to be a matter of being creative and how can we get to a happy medium on the overall look. We provided one option. It doesn't necessarily have to be the option. So it's something that we'll have to work on with the applicant to see where we can land with that.
Right.
To see, you know, how it all can fit in. Because I think that's where we're hung up right now is we can't visualize how it fits in with the rest of the site.
Right.
So it's just getting to that conclusion.
But the office component is allowed per the zoning?
Yes.
For the PUD?
Yep, so office and administrative facilities, so they're kind of gearing this as professional offices for like lawyers, insurance people, medical, and so
And for
forth.
myself to get a better understanding for the marketability that talked about having to skew that first access or not, do we know, is the office component going to be leased spaces or condos, like you own it?
I think their,
Sell them?
yeah, their preferred outcome would be condos.
To sell
So
them.
each unit would be owner occupied.
Okay, so then I can understand exactly why 4 spaces not in front of that end condo would be a big deal.
Right.
Okay?
Can I go back to the loading dock, which you just have wonderful picture right there?
This one, yes.
They have trucks coming in from the west, which means they enter at the driveway that's near Form Coat and so forth. And they are crossing a parking lot that they don't necessarily, DDK is there, but that doesn't mean it's going to be that way. I feel it's extremely difficult to have trucks come in at somebody else's business and proceed through. And a truck coming up Fire Lane would have to go turn around someplace, which would not be their property, to come back in. That's a mess as far as I'm concerned, and it is a very large problem for me to have that truck movement that way.
Yeah, how would that be handled? Would it be a cross-access easement on the title forever, or how would that work?
With the DDK, yeah, there is. There's, with the 2 sites right now, DDK's existing building and Formicote, they have a cross-access easement over both their parcels for all of the sites to be able to
Indefinitely,
access it.
essentially?
Yep,
Because Formica needs to get out to
Right.
Fire
Right.
Lane as well.
So that, potentially, that could stay, that would stay there.
right.
Yep, okay.
Does it mean the whole road? Just the road, but does it apply to the
that's-
parking lots?
It's not the parking lot, it's just the 24-foot drive aisle, and that's why we said that needs to stay clear, is because that's where people have the right to
To
drive.
use it, yeah.
Basically, a
So
driveway
it's-
is
Correct, it's a driveway easement over that north 24 feet of that road area, so that people can move back and forth. That was the original design out here, was that if DDK, for whatever reason, needed to get access off Fire Lane, they could come that way. If Formicote needed to get out to Fire Lane, they could. And if this site needed to kind of go either way, they could as well, but it would be on that north 24 feet, so to speak, of the pavement there, is reciprocal between each of the parties so that they can move about.
I understand that part.
Yep.
Totally. But how do they get to the west end of that 24 feet?
It's the driveway that comes up through that parking aisle.
So that's part of the,
Yep.
that's weird. I understand why you would need it, but I believe it is detrimental.
So essentially, in the DDK site, if in the future that site was ever sold, demolished, a new building built, that easement, that access would still remain.
Correct.
So no one could ever get rid of it.
Right. Unless everybody agrees.
And unless all
If
three
the
parties agree
sites
to, and
redevelop.
you have different access and
Right.
things change, right? Okay.
Right. And part of this was with, if you can harken back to when this was the building center site, there were lots of driveways
Yep.
out onto Chaska Boulevard, and the county really wanted to restrict access to 61, and so given how long and linear the site is, it really necessitated kind of cross-access easements, because otherwise you would just have one giant site to sell because you wouldn't have a way to gain access to the site. And providing this kind of loop system of shared access was really the way that it had to work, because we lost the ability to access directly off 61 where they could be independent of one another, and they really needed to share that facility and those responsibilities with each other. And so, yeah, it's, you know, as a, you know, if you're developing a site, you know, your preference would be that you'd be self-contained, and that's always a desirable approach. But in certain instances, and this is one of them, where it really just doesn't work that way, you know, then providing a shared access, you know, to facilitate multiple ownerships is really, it's not uncommon, but I fully understand that from an individual perspective, you know, trying to be self-determining on your property, yeah, it would be best if you had your own access in and out and didn't have to share, you know, with your neighbor. But in this instance, to make this project work because of how long and linear the site was east-west, that was really the only way to make it work, because we lost all the, you know, we had, I think there were 6 driveways, if I remember, I think 6, on the 61, and you can see in the end here, there's 1. And so we went from 6 driveway accesses on County Road 61 down to 1 access, and then you have really multiple accesses out to Fire Lane, but really you're still just coming out on Fire Lane to 61. And so it really limited how you could get and redevelop this site, which was one of the objectives laid out by the city council, was to redevelop this site. And so yeah, it's not optimal, it's not unusual either, and so that's really been laid out really from the beginning when DDK kind of because they tore off kind of the front part of their building where the hardware store was, and kind of redeveloped that as well. And so as part of that, that kind of was the thinking in this area, because we had already had conversations with the county about accesses out onto 61, and knew that, you know, if this is going to be any type of employment center, there's going to have to be truck access into here, and to accommodate that, we needed shared accesses.
Anything else for Liz? The applicant is in the audience, the vast audience, so if you would mind coming up and introducing yourself and your address, and we probably have some more questions for you.
Oh, good. I've been reminded that it is Valentine's Day tomorrow, not to come home empty-handed. So that's where I'm headed after this. My name is Mike Melton, CEO of DDK Companies. We're excited about the opportunity, I think, to collaborate and work together. Concept approval is like, oh my gosh, how big is that pile of things we have to overcome? We're glad to be here working with staff to try to solve some of these things. We don't have all the answers. Right now, once we get approval on concept, I made an assumption there, then we're able to go out and really begin to try to nail down end users for different purposes on the facility, until we have some concept approval that we're going in generally the right direction with the city and what our plans are. It's tough to do that. So that's kind of that next step. As we begin to work with our end users, a lot of that information we'll want to be throwing on the table and kind of mix it up and come out with a solution that I think will be great for everybody. DDK is happy, I'm happy, I'm proud to be a part of this process. And so if you have any little questions, I'll do my best.
Have you connected with the local market at all, meaning brokers of office and industrial space, to really understand what the need might be?
Yeah, we have put out some sort of soft tenders, I guess, to a number of individuals that I have relationships or we have relationships with. And the information that we've gotten back was strong enough to indicate that, as you know, you start going down a path, it can get expensive in time and resources. So certainly from our best interest and the best interest for the city was to make sure we had some of that upfront intel sort of put together. So we feel, in all honesty, we feel very comfortable with the piece in the back going. The office condo, we got to do a little bit more work on. It's not that we've had and received negative comments about that or negative inputs about that. We just haven't pushed quite as hard. A lot of different cats to herd, I guess, with that many different users.
Okay.
So that one we're doing a little bit more work on right now to get
That's
that
good.
resolved.
The bay sizes on the industrial seem small to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are those going to be tenants? You're gonna
Say that again, the size of the bays on the
Seem a
industrial?
little bit small. Are those planning to be tenants, or are you gonna sell those as condos as well?
Well, a couple of things that were kind of encouraging that came out is that there is a lot of users in that 4,000 or 5,000 square foot range. Little office in front, some manufacturing or distribution or something in the back end of it. But what we thought with this building is it gave us the greatest flexibility. So we could accommodate a 4,000 square foot user or an 8 or a 12 or the multiples of as we got up to that point. It may end up being two users in the entire building. And of course, that's going to significantly change some of the truck trafficking in the back, which we expect to be more panel sized. We're not looking at 53-foot users in a space, semi-trailers in a space of that. Everything tends to kind of scale out. If you've got that much product coming in and out, you're probably looking for a much larger
Bigger building.
facility. We have a couple of users that we're speaking with right now on that building that could potentially use maybe half of it. The second half could be leased out short term with the option for this one bigger user to eventually kind of grow into some of those things. So, you know, we're beginning to try to cross some T's and dot some I's, but it's a process, and we're just beginning that process. So.
I'd encourage you to think about both dock high and drive-in doors, especially for those smaller bay tenants. And then how much pre-leasing or, you know, in the case of the condos, needs to be completed before you'll kick off construction?
You know, the buildings, our plan is to kind of move right through. You know, we have 3 buildings. So obviously, if we have enough interest going on one of them, I mean, that's where we would start. We would continue as the process takes a certain amount of time to build this one, and we keep moving along. Obviously, activity begets activity, so we would look to gear up pretty aggressively once we can identify a couple of users, depending on where they're going. You know, unfortunately, what'll happen is there'll be 2 users on opposite ends, and then we'll have a whole other set of problems to try to sort out. So we're through with that. You know, the time and energy and resources to get it built properly and to meet those requirements of those end users coming in and the city and all the different pieces. It's in our interest to get that moved as fast as we can.
Thank you.
Do
I
you,
would imagine that would kind of phase out in those 3 buildings.
do you plan on the industrial building first or the office building first, or both at the same time, or?
Whoever puts the hard-earned cash down and ready to go. Obviously, there's infrastructure, and we're not to that point yet. But obviously, water, power services, things like that, there's a lot of coordination that'll have to happen between the 2 halves. Probably, I'm not sure. That's a good question. I don't think we're quite there yet. I think we have certain expectations, as does the city, on timing for the two different phases. So certainly that'll be a conversation we'll need to hone in on. But I think once we get a couple of users, it'll begin to unfold.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, you guys adequately handled up most of the questions I had. I guess I would just, it seems like you have a significant challenge with parking to resolve. And to me, I'm in manufacturing up in the industrial park, and I thought that it looked inadequate in the back as far as space and bays, but obviously you've done your homework, and you know, if that size of you know, condo in the back, if two of them can share one dock door, I guess you guys would know that better than I would. But and then I do think the ability to handle 53 footers back there, you're going to have to account for that, because vendors and, you know, customers are not going to align all the time with their logistics. And, you know, if you say only panel trucks can come in, you know that that's not going to happen all the time. So I think that's a significant issue that you'll have to, you know, figure out.
Yeah, I want to expand on that. And just to clarify, so the back building, is that going to be for lease, or you want to sell those as well?
Either way. Could go
Either
either
way.
way. So as an investment group, we could lease those spaces out, or it could be sold. It could
Because
be an
as you had
owner-occupied
mentioned, if you
leasing.
have a larger user, you might wind up with someone that has a lot more warehousing. It will need 53-foot trailers and cabs. And so if someone were to, you know, you might start off with small users if you sell them out, and then eventually maybe down the road, out of your control, someone buys 3 or 4 of them and wants to expand their business and grow, and now they're a large user, and now we have the truck problem. So to expand on that, I think, you know, that is potentially an
Well,
issue.
it could be a winter conditions problem too. If you have 6 or 12 inches of snow and you go through and you plow that, your 24-foot road becomes 20.
Yeah, sure.
So I do agree with the city. I mean, I think there is some work to be done there on that north
There
side.
will, and I agree with that. There
Yeah.
will be some work done. You know,
I mean, I like the concept in total. I just think there is a little bit of.
Right. I think the scale of the project will dictate some of that in the manufacturing world. You don't have the mega users coming to look for the little spaces, but you have the little guys looking for the little spaces, those kinds of things. I have a house and it's got a 3-car garage, and there's no way in the world I'm going to get a 5-car garage on it, no matter who I sell it to. So I think within the constraints of the site, it sort of dictates what that market is. And I think there are positives to that. There are some people that don't want the big semis around. They want to have that different sort of culture and thing happening. And if it is a big end user, you know, if it ended up being one user, and all they had was 2 53-foot trailers, yeah, I mean, that's part of the process that we're going through.
Sure.
The facility would then get developed and designed for that capability, for that specific purpose.
Right,
And
because
we
a
go through all the
20-foot
approvals.
building, 18-foot clear, I imagine you could probably rack 3 high in there, so you could potentially get a pretty good storage user.
Yeah,
Okay.
Then the last question I had is, because I guess I haven't been back there, but the back driveway is, yeah, well, Fire Lane is the street coming in, right?
Correct.
Which, by the way, that road needs some significant improvements and repairs. I mean, it's kind of a disaster now with only Cuzzy's traffic going in there.
Yeah.
But the driveway around the back, is that going to be cemented, or is it going to be tarred, or is it going to be gravel?
Around the back, it would probably be asphalt as a part of this project.
I'm assuming so, and that's sort of a collective process between all the different users.
Right.
You know, Formicote, DDK, and then
2/3 of it is in already.
And is-
Or, well, I guess 1/3 of it is in. Formicote in the spring will be in, which is just asphalt.
Right.
And then-
Okay, and indeed, behind your first building, that's asphalt?
Yes.
Okay.
There's no delineation, there's no curb, I mean, is there striping that's gonna delineate that access? Or is it just gonna be, hey, this back area, this lot is access?
I can't remember on the Formico project, to be honest, if we required a painted stripe or any, we did not, it was no structural
Right.
difference, that's
Okay.
for sure. I don't know if they had a stripe painted or not.
No.
I don't think so.
No,
Okay.
it's just
It's
merely
just-
the curb
Making-
widths and making sure that the access.
Property owners
width-
know to keep it clear.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
And then before the preliminary, all the fire access questions are answered, Kevin, or goes back there?
Yep.
Or you guys figure that out,
Yep.
I assume, yeah.
All of this, when they come back with their preliminary, as Liz mentioned, I mean, not only do you see it again, but the more in-depth staff review happens with engineering, public works, the fire department,
Okay.
all those different parts of our organization where this is, the concept is a little bit more contained into us in terms of, we generally know what they're looking for. But when we get to a preliminary plan, yeah, the fire hydrant locations, it's, as you're aware, but maybe not the others, it's a really detailed set of plans. And it's an expensive set of plans for the applicant, and that's why we go through this concept stage first. So they get a, like Mike mentioned, are you going in the general right direction? Before you go out and spend 6 figures or more, developing a set of plans, and it's like, well, that's not exactly what we
I
thought.
just want to make sure I'm on the right slice of pie. And that's as close.
Well, yeah, that was a bit of a rhetorical question, but I wanted you to give the 5-cent explanation, which is good.
You're welcome.
Can you clarify for us too, it'll remain a private road?
That's correct.
Okay, and so the 3 parcels will be responsible for maintaining it together?
Maintaining and all of that, correct.
Okay,
That is not a public alley or
okay.
Okay,
Pretty closely with the city, Formico and really granting, really using the money influence in the back end of it. So we've been working on some of this for a while, ownership.
Okay. Well, I'll bring it back to the commission. Comments before we,
The only one I have really is, it's awfully tight. That was the comment in the staff report, and I think it's too tight, too condensed, too something. Especially with the fact that you're coming past some very open spaces, and all of a sudden you seem to have many buildings close together. Not that they're big buildings or anything, it just seems like it's too tight, and that's where I'll leave it.
That was my thought also. The first time I looked at this, I thought, wow, I'm excited to see something being built there and bringing the tax base up and more jobs. But at the same time, we're really utilizing every square inch on that piece of property there with parking and building size. So I think we've got some work to do. I think we can make it work. It's just got to make work for both parties here.
it'll be interesting to see the next steps.
Yeah.
There's work to be done.
Yeah. Any more comments before we take a motion?
I would agree with most of the staff comments in the report. And I really just, I feel like the 2 uses together are just not complementary. I'm trying to imagine the users that would buy a condo with an industrial building right behind them.
Into the side of it and.
Yeah.
It's a little tough.
I would really prefer to see either a larger, industrial building that would better accommodate the site and make room in the back for the trucks, or all office. I think you're gonna have a difficult time combining the 2, but I'm interested to see the next phase.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion on the concept plan?
I would say that they, in terms of what we expect at the concept phase, they've met the needs for that. And work to do, there always is when somebody comes with a concept. So With that, I'm happy to make a motion to approve DDK Construction's concept plan for the Chaska Building Center, Phase 3.
Subject
second
to,
it.
yeah.
Subject to the 29 conditions outlined in the staff report.
Motion by Commissioner Pfeiffer,
I'll second the motion.
second by Commissioner Brass. Any additional discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Just one last piece, just for the applicant. Next Monday, typically these go the following Monday to city council, but next Monday is a holiday with President's Day, so it'll be the Monday after that this will go to the city council.
All right. Congratulations and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to other business. So now we would like to receive the minutes of the December 3rd, December 17th, and January 7th city council meetings. Do we need to vote on these one at a time?
No.
Okay, and then the park board report from December 10th and January 14th, and the EDA meeting minutes from December 17th. Can we have a motion?
I can make a motion. I don't think we normally have
Or
to
do we-
make
You
a
don't need to
motion.
be, you're
We
just.
just receive.
We're just receiving them. Okay, good. Well,
They're just informational.
I'm a rookie here, so
But we do
at this
do
part.
other visits going around.
Yep, I understand that. So at this point, we will do like a round table, and since we have so many new commissioners and alternates, we've never had a full table in the 5 years I've been around, so why don't we start, alternate Urbanski, go ahead and maybe give us the nickel tour of yourself, if you, or any comments you want to make about,
Elevator's great, yeah.
Sure. Todd Urbanski, moved into Chaska about a year and a half ago. It'll be 2 years in July. Previous to living in Chaska, I did a short 4-year stint in Long Lake, and prior to that, I was in the city of Hanover up by St. Michael and Rogers for about 20 some odd years. Sat on the city council up there for 8 years, worked with planning commission, worked with park board, was a volunteer firefighter there for a lot of years. So I've just always enjoyed being a part of things, rather have a voice in it versus just reading about it in the paper and getting torqued off once in a while.
excellent.
Professionally, I'm a realtor. I've been a realtor for 20 years now with Fazenden Realtors out of Wayzata. Prior to that, I was with Coldwell Banker for about 15 years. I enjoy pizza and beer, and I like to ski. There we go.
All right, well, welcome, and thank you for joining.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Commissioner Seiler?
Aaron Seiler. I've been a resident of Chaska for about 3 years. Prior to that, in Chanhassen for close to 10. Grew up in a smaller town in Minnesota, went to the University of Minnesota for college. Wife and 3 kids and a dog in Chaska here. Great family, great community. We're happy to be in the Southwest here. I work in corporate finance for a local company.
All right, thank you very much, and welcome aboard.
We need,
Commissioner Pfeiffer, anything you would like to add?
yeah, they don't know you, so.
Oh,
That's true, I guess
oh,
that's
well,
correct.
my name is Heather Pfeiffer, and
I was calling you Michelle Pfeiffer before you got
people always call me Michelle. I hear it all the time.
Not to say it was a letdown when you
No.
walked in.
Yeah, it's like, I wish, but ever since I got married and took that name, I hear Michelle all the time. I'm not even sure how long I've been, because I started it in the middle of somebody else's term, so I don't know. I think I've been on the commission maybe for 3 years now, or
I was gonna say,
it's
just say
close
a
to
few
3
years.
Yeah, I think it's 3 years now, but I'm not up for, renewal because I started in the middle of another one, so it's kind of odd. But and I've lived in Chaska for almost 4 years. Before that, I lived in Minneapolis for like, I don't know, 18 years or so, and lived in New Jersey and London and Madrid, and just kind of lived in a variety of places, so.
You say Madrid?
Madrid, Spain.
Yeah.
But I love Chaska, and I wanted to join the commission because I was really impressed with the ordinances of the city, and I feel like the city's very responsible in how we grow, and so that's why I'm a part of it. And I have 3 kids, twin boys who are 8, and a daughter who is 11, and they are in the Chaska Public Schools, so.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Commissioner Cross?
Susan, this is my last term starting. I did a whole set once upon a time with about 10 years between. So, and I've been in Chaska over 40 years. When I worked for pay was at the Arboretum Library, but I've volunteered at the Arboretum since '73. So plants is my specialty, if you want to call it a specialty. And so I enjoy working, and I'm sometimes very crabby.
She's passionate.
She likes her trees.
Yeah. She's our resident arborist, horticulturist. Perfect. Commissioner Bowie?
Misty Bovee, I've been on the commission maybe 2 years now. I think I came in midway too. Been a resident of Chaska for just over 3 years. Lived in Coon Rapids before that, my entire adult life. We have 4 children, 2 grown and 2 yet at home. Professionally, I'm a commercial real estate broker, and I specialize in healthcare. It's a small, weird little niche, but and it's been wonderful to be on the commission. Enjoyed it.
And you're also the vice chair.
Yeah, I guess I just found that out. Yeah.
Surprise! Yeah, surprise. And thank you. Commissioner Lacey?
I'm Carl Lacey. My wife and I have lived here since '08, moved from the Lake Minnetonka area, retired, small business owner and telecommunications company exec that did government projects for the U.S. government all over the country. Father of 2, grandfather of 5, and I'm involved with another nonprofit here in Chaska area, Fishing with Friends, and if you haven't heard about it, I will be talking with you at some point.
That's where I met you at the Lions meeting.
Yeah, we're very happy to be involved, have served on a couple of other task force and enjoyed it, and this was a logical next step for me.
Thank you, sir, and welcome to the commission.
Thank you.
Commissioner Brass?
Yeah, so lived in Chaska for 13 years. Since 2006, we built our first home in Clover Ridge. Then we recently sold that 3 years ago. We built a new house in the town course. And so we live there. That's where we live right now. We plan to stay there until our kids are grown. 2 boys, 5 and 8. No, 5 and 9. Had a birthday yesterday. And grew up in Eden Prairie, so very familiar with the area. I work with Colliers International. It's a commercial real estate firm. I'm specialized in industrial brokerage, land and office. I don't touch a lot of retail, but I know it. Been there for 15 years. Prior to that, I was at the University of Minnesota. I have a degree in structural engineering. Never went into the field. But my family's been in real estate. Company that I work with, my family's been involved with. It was Welsh Companies, now it's Colliers. So I've kind of been living it my whole life and thought it'd be a good opportunity to kind of give back to the community and serve on the commission. That's about it, I guess. That's a quick rundown.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
And welcome aboard.
Thanks.
And alternate Commissioner Olson? I'm just proud that I know everybody's name.
Now the cheat sheet
You don't
goes
have to
away.
look at the,
Yeah, I have that here, by the way.
I'm Travis Olson. I've lived in Chaska for a little over 11 years. have two daughters, 15, not 16 yet, 15 and 13. They're both in Chaska schools, and love it here. I professionally, I'm a finance director for a small privately owned company up in Fridley, so I enjoy a nice, pleasant drive every day to and fro.
That's a nice drive.
Yes, you do.
But moved from Wisconsin 11 years ago, found Chaska, loved it, brought us back to our roots originally from Iowa, small town, so, but yet close enough to the cities, so, you know, it's everything we could ask for. And for the commission side, I was sitting in the seats this last summer, so I enjoyed Commissioner Cross and her tree loving with the project that was in my backyard, so that really kind of left an impression on me, so I wanted to be able to, you know, give back and be able to sit in this seat and make sure that we were able to continue to do that for the residents of Chaska as well.
Thank you, and I'm Brian Dahlke, I'm the new chair. Big shoes to fill as Mike Hung went on to the city council, where he found out he'll be running for election in May, but yeah, surprise again, but I'm sure he'll do just fine. And I've been on the commission for 5 years, I guess. I am a lifer in Chaska. 2 boys, married, 2 boys, 31 and 27. One of them he moved to California, he thought it was warmer there. But yeah, I also am passionate about Chaska and the things we do in this city. It's you know, it's the best town around, in my opinion. And now, in other meetings, you know, obviously, we won't spend time on the introductions and stuff, but at this point, you know, little observations or questions for Kevin or Liz. You know, we just do a quick, if you don't have any comment, you don't have to make any comments. So just to go on that, I'm just gonna mention a couple of things. Could we send out to everybody the guidelines we put together for the class 1, 2, and 3 materials?
Yep.
Electronic, that way everybody knows what we're talking about when the buildings have to be a certain percentage of each class material. So I think that'd be good for everybody, including me. And then the last thing is just a comment. I'm glad that today we're finally doing some work on Pioneer Trail. The weather finally gave us a bit of a break. It's been pretty torturous in Chaska. And hopefully by next week, we'll be able to use that at least as a gravel road till this summer. So that will be very, the people at Quick Trip will be very happy. Yeah.
I had a quick comment or question in regards to how the information is pushed to the iPad. So for instance, when we were looking at this development, I had to pull up the concept plan, and then a separate file was the alternate concept. And so I had to like close out of that and then load this one and then load that and have it wait. If there's a concept and an alternate, it could be on one file.
Yep.
So when you can just scroll back and
Absolutely.
forth and see.
I think that's a really good point, because we don't use this as
Right.
frequently as you guys do, so if you guys run into any issues
Yeah,
with
and so I
that-
found myself loading
Yep.
and
No,
yeah,
I think that's a good point, and we'll definitely try to merge
merge concepts and
most of
alternates
those
together.
plans
Yeah,
together.
that'd be
I
great.
think for at least accessibility purposes, if you're trying to find something, it's nice, but if you guys don't mind everything getting merged into one. we
Yeah, I
can
mean, the
certainly make that
memos or the
happen.
engineer letter, and you know,
Yep.
that can be separate. I mean, I put just the
plans.
Then
Yep.
along with-
plans and the alternate plans all together so they easily can be scrolled and look at the differences.
And then one last, I had mentioned before, if we could add the agenda to the
Yep.
iPad
Yep.
version, that would be great.
Yep, we'll definitely make note of that for the next meeting.
Thank
If you want to send a
you.
reminder out, don't hesitate to.
Okay.
I always want to make sure we accommodate these comments and suggestions. so.
And Kevin or Lizzie, anything else to add?
Nope.
All right. Susan?
I have one question. The new site, are we looking for a new site for the, my mind, that's why I can't quit soon. The License Center, because I thought this site would have been very nice for the License Center. Do we have a site?
Yes, well, we're working on a site, yes. The county's preference is to expand what they are able to offer at the License Center
Yes.
and to merge it with their need to find a new home for social services. And so, this site is not large enough to accommodate that.
This site is not large enough?
Correct.
Okay. Because this would have made a wonderful license center for the,
But from efficiency standpoints, they're trying to merge
Yes.
some of those facilities together and kind of, I mean, you see it in Dakota County and other places where they have these different annexes around, and with the judicial center continuing to grow down at the courthouse, that's kind of the piece that they're going to be spinning off next is the social services and kind of combining it with the license center and an expanded components to the license center, like passports and other things that you can't do there right now. And so, so yeah, we're actively working with them. I'm not ready to talk about where that is, but yes, we are.
thank
See me
you.
afterwards.
All right.
We have a family vacation plan for our meeting next month, so I won't be here next.
Okay.
Duly noted in March.
Maybe shoot Liz an email just so that she has that
Yep,
info.
closer
and-
to the day it would be
Yep.
preferred, just so we can
Yeah.
make note of that.
All right, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second?
Come on, one of the other newer guys.
I'll second.
All right, motion by Lacy, second by Seiler. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We're done.